Hi, this is Professor Geeta Shah, co-creator of International Economics. I'm going to teach you Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is on international economic institutions since World War II. After studying this chapter, you will be able to classify and give examples of the main types of international economic organizations. You will be able to compare and give examples of the different levels of integration found in regional trade agreements. You will be able to analyze the roles of international economic organizations, and you will be able to discuss common criticisms of international economic organizations. Introduction. International institutions and issues since World War II. International institutions are the rules and organizations that govern and constrain behavior. There are two types of institutions. Formal institutions are written sets of rules that explicitly state what is and is not allowed. Informal institutions are customs or traditions that define appropriate behavior but without legal enforcement. There are 5 types of institutions. 1. Commodity or industry-specific organizations. These range from trade associations to international standard-setting bodies to powerful cartels. Examples: oil-producing exporting countries, International Telecommunication Union, International Lead and Zinc Study Group. Second type of institution is commissions and agencies for managing shared resources. International Boundary of Water Commission, Lake Chad Basin Commission, Mekong River Commission. Third type of institutions is development funds and banks. Inter-American Development Banks, Asian Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank. Fourth type of institution is international trade agreements involving few nations, regional trade alliances or trade blocs. North American Free Trade Agreement, Mercado Común del Sur, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. And fifth type of institutions is Global Organization for Trade, Development and Macroeconomic Stability, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, World Trade Organizations. The IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO. The 3 global organizations that play a major role in international economic relations are the International Monetary Fund, known as IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, known as WTO. The IMF and World Bank. International Monetary Fund, founded by 29 countries at the Bretton Woods Conference in July 1944. The 188 member IMF is the central monetary institution in today's international economy. Funding for IMF comes from its membership fee or quota. The price of membership depends on the size of economy and importance of its currency in the world trade. The most visible role of International Monetary Fund is to intercede by invitation whenever a nation experiences a crisis in its international payments. For example, if a country imports more than its exports, then it may run out of foreign exchange reserves. Foreign exchange reserves are dollars, yen, pounds, euros, or another currency or gold that is accepted internationally. In the event of a financial crisis, members borrow against IMF quotas, IMF conditionality, requirement for the borrowing member to carry out economic reforms in exchange for a loan. IMF has its own currency called as SDR or special drawing rights. Special drawing rights are based on country's quota and are a part of its international reserves. World Bank has same membership and similar structure of IMF. Members' voting rights are proportional to number of shares owned. The original purpose of the IMF and World Bank is to provide financing mechanisms to rebuild Europe after World War II. Main function today assisting development in non-industrial economies. The GATT, the Uruguay Round, and the World Trade Organizations began with 23 nations in 1946 when the International Trade Organization was established. The General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs followed in 1950. The GATT functioned through trade rounds, times when countries periodically negotiate a set of incremental tariff reductions. During the Kennedy Round in the mid-60s and the Tokyo Round in 1970s, other issues included problems with dumping, subsidies to industry, non-tariff barriers to trade. The Uruguay Round established the World Trade Organization. The Doha Round, Doha Development Agenda, focused on trade issues of importance of developing countries. The General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs followed the following principles. National treatment. Imports must be given up similar treatment on the domestic market as domestically produced goods. Non-discrimination. Enshrined in the concept of most favored nation, a prohibition against discrimination. This table shows the 9 rounds of GATT met at different years, and there were different number of participants in this table rounds. And you can see the last round met is known as Doha, WTO, in 2001 with 153 number of participants. Regional trade agreements. Regional trade agreements between two or several countries are another important institution of the world economy, called multilateral agreement because it includes potentially all the countries of the world. There are 5 types of agreements: partial trade agreement, free trade area, custom union, common markets, economic union. Partial trade agreements is free trade in the outputs of one or few industries. Free trade area is free trade in outputs of goods and services. Custom union is free trade in outputs of goods and services plus a common external tariff. Common market is the custom union plus free movement of inputs like capital and labor. Economic union is common market plus substantial harmonization of economic policies, including a common currency. This is the table of prominent regional trade blocs. Africa, COMESA, common market for Eastern and Southern Africa. Objective is common market. ECAS, Economic Community of Central African States. Objective is common market. ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States. Objective is common market. Asia, EFTA, Asian Free Trade Agreement. Objective is free trade area. NZESARTA, Australia, New Zealand closer economic relations. Objective is free trade area. APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. Objective is free trade area. Europe, EEA, European Economic Area, common market. EFTA, European Free Trade Association, free trade area. EU, European Union, Economic Union. Middle East, ACM, Arab Common Market, Customs Union. AMU, Arab Maghreb Union, Economic Union. GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council, common market. Western Hemisphere, CARICOM, Caribbean Community, common market. Mercosur, Southern Cone Common Market, common market. NAFTA, North American Free Trade Area, free trade area. There are 5 types of regional trade agreements. Partial trade agreement, 2 or more countries agree to drop trade barriers in a selected groups of product categories such as steel or autos. Free trade area, nations trade goods and services across international boundaries without paying tariffs and without any limitations imposed by quotas. Custom Union, an FTA plus common external tariff. European Union in the 1970s and 1980s. Mercosur in South America. Common Market, a CU plus an agreement to allow the free mobility of inputs such as labor and capital. The European Union in 1990s. And fifth type of regional trade agreement is economic union, a common market with coordination of macroeconomic policies, including common currency, harmonization of standards and regulations. As for example, United States, Canada, European Union members participating in the Euro currency zone. Since 1948, over 500 agreements have been listed with the WTO, with majority of the notification since 1990. 338 of these agreements are still active. The WTO and GATT allow RTAs, assuming they create more new trade than they destroy. It means trade creation exceeds trade diversion. There are for and against arguments for regional trade agreements. The central economic question: are RTAs supportive of gradual long-run increases in world trade building blocks, or do they tend to become obstacles to further relaxation of trade barriers? Proponents of RTAs view them as building blocks toward freer, more open world trade. Opponents view RTAs as undermining progress toward multilateral agreements. Opponents question many of these assumptions. Their greatest criticism is that RTAs undermine progress toward multilateral, worldwide agreements. Pro-trade opponents of RTAs do not believe that they encourage agreement through the WTO. Opponents point out that RTAs are often discriminatory against poor and less developed countries. Proponents of several arguments on their side: easier for a few countries to reach agreement than it is for all the countries in the WTO. The domestic effects of a reduction of trade barriers are less dramatic. RTA member countries can experiment with new agreements, RTAs can be used as a political and economic threat to encourage agreements in WTO. The role of international economic institutions. The primary difference between international institutions and national governments is that the former has limited enforcement power. However, international institutions help provide order and reduce uncertainty. Order and certainty are public goods, intangibles that are different from most goods and services. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rival in the consumption. It means no one is excluded from consuming public good. Non-rival means consumption by one person does not reduce consumption by another person. And because of the non-excludability and non-rival in the consumption creates the problem of free riding. Private markets fail to supply public goods because of free riding. People have no intense incentive to pay for a public good because they cannot be excluded from its consumption even if they don't pay. Maintaining order and reducing uncertainty. Two important functions of international economic institutions are to reduce free riding. Maintaining order in international economic relations and reducing uncertainty. Four examples of international public goods. Open markets in a recession. Purpose: to prevent a fall in exports from magnifying the effects of a recession. Second type of public good, capital flows to less developed countries. Purpose: to assist economic development in poor countries. Third type of public good, international money for settlement of international debts. To maintain a globally accepted system for paying debts. And the fourth example of international public good is last resort lending to prevent the spread of some types of financial crisis. Criticism of international institutions. International institutions receive three types of criticism: sovereignty and transparency. International institutions can violate national sovereignty by imposing unwanted domestic economic policies. Transparency concerns are based on questions about the mechanism with which decisions are made within an international institution. Second type of criticism is ideology. Critics argue that the advice and technical assistance provided by developing countries are often a reflection of the biases and wishes of developed countries' wishes. Third type of criticism they face is implementation and adjustment costs. When agreements are reached that combine developed and developing countries, there are often asymmetric in the ability to absorb the cost associated with them that favor developed nations. So, in this chapter, you learnt about the big three of international economic organizations and regional trade agreements.